Hello, welcome to this long-term technical analysis video of Bitcoin. Here we can see the entire history of Bitcoin in one chart. We can see its parabolic rise up to around about $20,000 back in December 2017. Then its massive descent down to $3,000 or so in 2018, a year later. We can then start to see its recovery back up to around about $12,500 in summer last year, June 2019. Then a subsequent corrective period with a final drop back in March this year down to $5,000 or so. And then the rise since then, which has been gradual, punctuated by these large, big movements. But the overall trend for the last 6 months or so from this point has been bullish. It all depends on what happens here as to what happens next. If we break the 13,800 resistance that has been here since way back in December 2017, we will very rapidly climb to a new high of around about 20,000 US dollars and breach past this peak that we saw back in December 2017. This will cause a massive bull market for cryptocurrencies, because suddenly we'll see news stories about Bitcoin everywhere in the news, as we're starting to see at the moment. The general ethos and general recognition of cryptocurrencies is actually improving dramatically over the course of the past 6 months or so. Alternatively, if we fail to break here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit in a minute and show you a little more in depth about what is actually happening around this inflection point, then we could retrace all the way back down to this long-term support down at the bottom here, which is actually the number of hodlers of Bitcoin. So the people underneath here are just holding their Bitcoin, and in actual fact, if this fails, we'll actually buy more around the $6,000 to $8,000 region. You'll notice that we're currently above both the 50-day and the 200-day moving averages, and there's very little resistance left at this region to stop us from moving higher. If you own Bitcoin and you're looking to take a quick profit, if we do break here, something around the $16,500 region would be appropriate. If you're willing to, be in it for the long run, $20,000, and if you really want to take advantage of a potential bull market for Bitcoin, $23,600 to $24,000 would be appropriate in this instance before seeing a larger scale correction following that. Notice that the long-term line of support is actually now rising considerably. By the time we get around about here, the cheapest you'll be able to buy Bitcoin long term is around about $6,500, and that represents the same low in terms of the 3,500 that we saw back in 2018. So let's zoom in a little bit. This is a day chart, so let's zoom in a little bit further on this line of resistance here. You'll notice that we're interacting with it fairly frequently. We've already hit it once and had a corresponding sell-off back down to the 200-hour moving average, and then we had a subsequent rally. So if we don't pass the 13,838 point again, then this will turn bearish, and we'll probably find support somewhere further down around this region, $11,500. Moving further out, we can see there's additional support further down at around about the $7,000 region, but I doubt that's going to actually take place. I'm actually relatively confident that there is a bullish sentiment to Bitcoin. You'll see that we've been following the moving average, the 50-day moving average, quite nicely over the past couple of weeks, and in particular here you'll see that any crossing is very much abruptly met with a corresponding opposite crossing relatively frequently, and that's a 4-hour chart. Let's look at a day chart. We haven't had a cross on the day chart, a bearish cross at all. The last bullish cross was back in May, which conveniently was the time of the halvening for Bitcoin. So the halvening was when we broke this long-term descending channel that we'd hit once and bounced off of. We're now on this more bullish path, and if I were to extrapolate a line of support for this, we could correct all the way back down towards the $11,000 region very comfortably on this movement. Notice this happened a couple of times before we'd actually have to break and potentially have a descending bearish pattern. Again, I don't particularly see the fundamental reasons for doing that at the moment. I personally think that the support is going to reach here, and we could see a nice little movement higher for Bitcoin. But it all depends on what happens in the next couple of days. Notice that we are on the end of the month, so the monthly charts would actually start to give us a lot more information. And I'm just going to zoom out of that because that is hideous. So it all depends on where we close on the monthly chart, and look at that monthly chart. That is a very, very bullish monthly chart. If I just tidy that up. So we've had a nice parabolic movement. In actual fact, that matches a perfect Elliott wave pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So technically, from an Elliott wave perspective, we should see a little correction here before moving higher ultimately in the long run. But we'll see what happens. But on the monthly chart, that is a very, very bullish candle, rising from a low of around about 10,300 to a high of obviously where we are now, 13,800. That is an extremely bullish chart on a monthly time frame. Moving to weekly, once again, you can see that pattern play out. 1, 2, 3, week 3, 4, 5. Potentially this could still be part of a wave 3 pattern. We could see a sell-off, or we could even see a continuation of that wave 3 pattern if we're so inclined, perhaps up to $16,500. We will wait and see what happens there. But notice the RSI is already overbought on a week chart, which is actually quite a powerful metric. On a month chart, we're also again starting to get towards the overbought territory of late. Moving down to a day chart and a 4-hour chart, things are a little less confident. On a 4-hour chart in particular, we'd still have room to maneuver to break that resistance area at 13,800. On a day chart, however, looking at the RSI, we are starting to have a selling tendency, perhaps down to this support level at around about 11,900. Let's look at another technical indicator. Let's look at the MACD, which is the moving average convergence and divergence. So we're here right now on a day chart. We're starting to turn over. We're starting to see divergence. As this price continues to slightly climb with weakness, we can start to see the price starting to curl around. If these two cross over in the next 2 weeks or so, we will start to see a fairly dramatic drop. On a week chart, we have actually started to part again. So on a week chart, we are extremely bullish. Those lines didn't actually cross over on the week chart. We noticed the last time they crossed around about that inflection point that I mentioned earlier, around the line of descent that we broke through, the long-standing line of descent that we broke through back in May around the halvening time. So that was the kind of inflection point there that was probably helped or assisted by people buying as a result of speculation on the halvening. We're now at an inflection point again, and with the bullish sentiment in the market and the number of people that are mentioning Bitcoin and the number of news articles that are coming out about Bitcoin, I suspect that we are going to have a significant break of this resistance level, perhaps raising as high as $16,000 before having then a corresponding sell-off as people bank quick profits. But once again, we have to break this area first before we're going to see any of that action. Looking very, very, very short term on an hour chart, you'll notice that we are currently very, very dicey in terms of the moving averages. We're kind of plateauing here for quite a while whilst people decide whether they want to buy what is, comparatively expensive Bitcoin if we are going to see a sell-off, and whether they want to obviously push it over into the arguably new territory or price action of the high 13,000s or low 14,000s. Moving out to a 4 hour, once again, loads of support around here. We're kind of coalescing and positively diverging with this. Nice little cross there for the MACD. No divergence there, convergence if anything with the price action, so that's a positive sign, a bullish indicator for the price to actually breach this 13,800 region. On a day chart, like I said, crossing over here, so on a day chart looking a little bit weaker, which is more statistically significant. A week chart, parting ways, so we might get a small correction down here and then a breakthrough. And on a month chart, very, very bullish in general. So long term, extremely bullish for Bitcoin, which I'm sure the majority of people who are watching this channel actually are. In the short to medium term, we may have a small correction just because of the amount of bullishness in the market of late. We have had quite a nice rally recently, although it has been relatively slow. It has nonetheless been quite dramatic from this low point of $5,000 back in March all the way to 13,000, almost 14,000 recently. Great. I hope you enjoyed that brief analysis video of Bitcoin at this key inflection point. When we breach or when we bounce from that zone, I will have another update for you in the markets to make sure that we can capture the majority of movements. If you own Bitcoin here, I would de-escalate some of your risk. Perhaps if you bought around this region or underneath $10,000, taking 10 to 20% of your profits here would probably be appropriate, just in case we do have a short-term sell-off down to closer towards 10,000. I would then naturally rebuy at one of these points, so 10,200 to 10,000 to 11,800, just to really, if you want to make your portfolio work as hard as it possibly can for you. Elsewise, I wouldn't actually liquidate too much Bitcoin around this region because there is quite a high tendency for us to break here and continue on to these kind of figures, which are obviously brand new territory for Bitcoin.